Hey, Emu.
Hi, Rabbi
Um,
Foreman.
Back again to continue this exploration. Um, in a moment, I want to pick up with the cliffhanger that we left in the, when we last talked.
God's
Um,
vulnerability. Welcome back to A Book Like No Other. A Book Like No Other is a product of Aleph Beta and made possible through the very generous support of Shari and Nathan Lindenbaum. Thanks, guys. So, God's vulnerability. That is where we left off last time. Not the most comfortable of topics. How could we possibly talk about God being vulnerable? We're going to get into that in just a second. But before we do, I just want to remind you how we even got to talking about God being vulnerable in the first place. So, just to recap a little bit from our last episode. Last time, we saw all these new parallels, all these different ways that God at Sinai seems to be fixing what went wrong between Yaakov and Yitzhak. It's like God is doing everything to make sure that at Sinai, father and son would now have an honest encounter. But then we came to that moment of encounter and we saw something kind of strange. When God speaks to the people, he doesn't use words at first, he uses this sound, a shofar blast. And the weird part is that this sound, this call, it seems to echo another sound, another voice from Genesis. In fact, two voices, Yaakov's, but also Esav's. And it's not just Asap's voice that gets echoed, but Asap's cry, this very painful, wordless cry that Asaph lets out when he realizes that Yaakov got the blessing. That's what really got us thinking. Asap's cry is so full of vulnerability, especially coming from Asaph, the quintessential strong man. It made us wonder if the Torah wants us to hear echoes of that vulnerability in God's shofar blast as well. Now, there's something really compelling about that possibility. But also, cue the discomfort, right? God vulnerable? Is that even a combination we should be considering? And I don't just mean considering in relation to these texts at Revelation, but considering at all, like in general. For the most part on this podcast, we stick to close reading the Torah text. But for an issue as sensitive as this one, Rabbi Foreman wanted to take a step back and consider our Masorah, our tradition. Is there precedent in our tradition to think about God as vulnerable? I want to share with you Rabbi Foreman's thoughts on this broader issue, and then we'll get back to the particular challenge of how God might be vulnerable at Revelation itself.
God's vulnerability, actually, that whole idea might kind of rub you the wrong way, right? I mean, if you've been yeshiva trained, if you have any background in Jewish philosophy, you're kind of thinking, "What? Just wait a minute here. How can we even talk about God being vulnerable? God's all powerful. God's completely self sufficient. God's perfect. Haven't you read the Rambam Shloshesrei Ikrei Emunah, the 13 Articles of Faith? God's perfect. He's unchanging. This is just basic Jewish theology. The truth is, we aren't the first people to grapple, to be perplexed by these problems, because the Torah itself seems to use language of vulnerabilities. You know, in Kabbalah, you have the same issue, this idea of the Ein Sof, God being the ultimate infinity in the universe, a limitless being. But that limitless being, paradoxically, chose to create finite beings with free will and chose to establish a relationship between them. The Arizal talks about Tzimtzum in God creating the universe, this idea that God contracts himself. But it's not just that God contracts himself in creating the universe in some kind of physical way, in terms of allowing for the laws of physics. It's not just something objective and antiseptic like the laws of physics. It's also emotional. Part of Tzimtzum is that God chooses to reach out to us and have a relationship with the universe, a relationship with us in love. And love, by definition, always implies a kind of vulnerability. What if that love isn't reciprocated? If I care about the other, what if they choose not to care about me? You know, there's a piyut that we say on Yom Kippur. It's always touched me, that piyut. It's Ma'aseh Elokeinu. We talk about the things that God creates. And you know, one of the things that God creates is us, and he chooses to have a relationship with us. Listen to the words of this piyut. Avita Tehillah, You sought praise. You desired connection. With who? With vulnerable, finite beings, with humans, with glume gush, from clods of earth. That's all we really are. Migare gay, from those who dwell in a valley of death and we die, and you care about us anyway, despite the fact that we're extinguished in just a few years. Vihi, and that Vihi tilatecha. That is your glory. Listen to that piyut carefully, right? This God who's so magnificent, ve'avita tehila, and you sought, you desired connection. That Hebrew word is such an interesting word, ve'avita. It's really about desire. It's about longing. You chose to long for humanity. What a vulnerable word. Over and over and over again, the piyut talks about that. And a perfect being shouldn't long for anything, but God chooses to long for us. It's so paradoxical, it's so touching that the most magnificent being in the universe, that all the angels quake in front of, chooses to relate to servants, to those who are slaves in Egypt, chooses to reach out to them in love, and in so doing, takes a chance that we won't love him back. And that's what this piyut is all about. And that is the chance you take in love. Does that make you weak? No. The piyut on Yom Kippur says that makes you strong. It's the ultimate expression of strength. When you make yourself vulnerable to those you love, it's one of the most powerful things you can do in life.
Okay, so with this deeper understanding of divine vulnerability in mind, it's time to turn back to Sinai. Because even if God's vulnerability is evoked in other sources, in Tefillah and Kabbalah and Ashkafa, it's still surprising to find God's vulnerability at play here, at this grand moment of revelation. The dominant image we associate with Sinai isn't vulnerability, but majestic, overwhelming awesomeness. God's booming shofar blast just doesn't feel like a vulnerable moment. And yet, our parallels are suggesting something different. That God's voice at this particular moment, the shofar cry, carries the echo of Esav's vulnerable cry. What is so especially deeply vulnerable about God's revelation at Sinai? Rabbi Foreman thought that we might find an answer if we just continued reading a little ahead in Exodus. Plus, burning theological conundrums aside, there were even more parallels to the deception story that Rabbi Foreman wanted to show me.
You and I, over these last sessions, we've traced this remarkable series of parallels in Exodus and the Revelation story in Exodus 19. In order, the events of Exodus 19 seem to mimic the events of Genesis 27. And they seem to mimic it all the way through, right? And were the beginning of Exodus 19 mimic the beginning of the deception story back with Yaakov and Esav. The middle of it mimic the middle of the deception story. The end of it mimic the end of the deception story. And we were right up to the end. But I want to show you something, because as you start reading those 10 commandments, they also seem to remind us of Genesis 27. Almost like we're restarting from the beginning in some crazy way. Like, think about that first command. We talked about it from the standpoint of God expressing his love and vulnerability. But put that out of your head for just a second. Just use the language for a second. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Someone comes, introduces themselves, says, "Here's who I am," and uses the word Anochi to do that. What does that remind you of back in Genesis 27?
Those are the words that Yaakov uses
To
to introduce himself to Father. He
falsely.
says, he says, Anochi Esav bechorecha.
I am the great doer, right? But in a certain kind of way, Emu, isn't God also introducing himself as a doer, but as a doer in the context of love? What does God said he just did? Read the rest of Anochi Hashem Elokecha.
Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim, who took you out of the land of Egypt, of the house of bondage.
I just did something for you through signs and wonders and miracles. I took you out of Egypt. I responded to your cries. I was there for you at your moment of need. I took you out and cared for you. I did, in essence, what it is that you wanted of me. maybe even what it is that you asked of me. Now, you never asked me to take you out of Egypt. You just screamed with your cries. But in those screams, I heard a plea to be taken out of Egypt. And I responded to that. Does that remind you of anything of the lie that Yaakov said when he impersonated Esav? He also used the words Anochi, but he also talked about doing something.
Hmm.
Anochi Esav b'charecha, asiti ka'asher dibarta elai. I've done like that which you asked of me. Now, Exodus, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm Lord your God. Asher, that did something. Asher that took you out of Egypt, the house of slaves. Yaakov said, I am Esav. I did that which you asked of me, and that wasn't true. I didn't go hunt game. I pretended that I did. Well, God said, I did do that which you asked of me. I did go hunting. I hunted Egypt. I shot them down so that you could go free. So this is the truth of the matter. And I really did what you asked of me in your
Hmm.
moment of peril. The
I w-
authentic version of Yaakov's misrepresentation.
Okay, so we were seeing how God's words in the first commandment echo but also correct Jacob's words in deception. But in the back of my mind, I was wondering what this had to do with vulnerability. If anything, these parallels seem to paint God as masterful and decisive. I mean, if they brought out anything Asaph like about God, it's God's strength as a doer. To bring us back to the concept of vulnerability, Rabbi Foreman honed in on what exactly it is in the first commandment that God says that he did for us.
And now, I mean, think about what does God say? Anochi
Uh,
Hashem Elokecha. I am the Lord your God. And what did I do? I just took you out of the house of slaves. Let's just think about from the standpoint of God's vulnerability. Here is God before he takes the people out of Egypt. And what's it like to be God? So, how does God represent himself, so to speak, in heaven to all his ministering angels? It's like, what's the talk of heaven regarding God? It's like those ministering angels are, oh boy, God is so cool. I wonder if I could be in his court today. I wonder if I could be one of those ministering angels because he is just so cool. He is Mr. Doer. He is the one who made the universe. I wonder if I could watch him make a new galaxy today. Like it would, he's really cool. He's so powerful, and he's unflappable. Also, you know why? He never breaks his rules. He's got his rules of nature, his rules of physics, his rules of biology. They apply everywhere. The rules in the Andromeda galaxy have the same inverse square law of gravity as they do in the Milky Way galaxy. He's the big rule giver, the big doer. And then all of a sudden, something happens that completely changes God's reputation. Some slaves are in trouble in this little rock, the third rock around this ordinary star in the Milky Way galaxy, and God falls for them and decides to upend his rules, do away with them. And all of a sudden, the inverse square law of gravity doesn't matter anymore. None of the laws of physics matter anymore. God is like changing things. And the angels are like, what are you doing? And God is, no, you understand. I care about these guys. I hear their pain. I feel for them. Really, you've turned like a softie? Like, yeah, I really am a softie. These are my children. I feel for them. I love them. I'm going to break the rules for them. I'm going to go and save them. And God introduces himself to the people that way. I love you guys. You know what I did? I changed everything for you. I just changed my whole everything. I didn't
it,
keep the
it sounds like what you're
rules.
saying is the thing that I'm known for, which is power and
Yes.
justice and law and physics, and that thing that I'm known for isn't all of me. I'm actually want to be known for something else. People don't know the whole me.
I want to be known to you for something else because I have an intimate relationship with you. And therefore, when you think of me, don't just think of me as the God of creation. Isn't it interesting? Everyone always asks this question. Why didn't God reveal himself as the God of creation? Anochi Hashem asher barati et haolam. I am the
Wow.
God who created the world. He doesn't say that.
I never heard that question before, actually,
It's a
and
great
I've worked here
question.
for 12 years. That is a
It's
great question. And I got the chills because actually, he's not interested in being known as
that's
the
right.
God who created the universe as much as he is known for the beginning of our relationship.
I'm the God who loved you so much that I took you out of Egypt and I broke the rules that I put in place in creation. That's the God I am.
Hmm.
What matters to you is that I cared for you. How vulnerable is that? I made myself vulnerable to you because now if I come out and I love you, I hope that I can be loved in return. And so, all told in Exodus, what you have is sort of two forms of God's voice. Before God even says anything in words, he says it in a cry and a voice. And that cry is this visceral cry that is so vulnerable. And that's one way in which God echoes Jacob and Esau. And then that voice resolves itself into words. And in the moment that it does, God gives words to the vulnerability, which was so plain just in the cry and the voice. And God is saying, let me tell you why I'm so vulnerable, why you're hearing such vulnerability in that cry of the shofar. It's because I'm the God who did everything for you, came out of the sky and changed my reputation and put myself out in love for a band of slaves. I'm the God who took you out of Egypt. And therefore, please, lo yelecha Elohim achirim al panai.
Oh, wow.
Don't worship idols. Lo taselecha pesel. Don't make for yourself something that you could feel and fool yourself with something you can touch. V'chol tmuna, or fool yourself with something you could see. Don't do that. I'm the God who can't be seen. I'm the God who can't be felt. Open yourself up to I really am. Don't give in to the confirmation bias of what you can touch and what you can feel. Because back when Yaakov introduced himself falsely and lied, Father tried to figure out who he was. And Father said in verse 21, Gishana v'amushecha, let me come and touch you. I want to touch you. God says, never make that mistake again. Don't make me a pesel, a sculpture that you can touch. And then Yitzchak, who was so into what he could see, was so taken by what he could see, even though he was blind. He said, Re'eh, Reach b'ni kareach sadeh. See, you smell just like your clothes smell just like you came from the field. Well, that was a lie. That's not true. Couldn't see anything. You were smelling, but he was so enamored with the sense of sight that he pretended he could see something he couldn't see. You too, never pretend you could see something you can't see without me. Never pretend I'm a picture. There is no picture. Never pretend. Give in to the truth, right? Give in to the truth that I can't be seen. And now all of that sensory perception stuff that we were talking about now takes on a real resonance. It really matters. Don't misunderstand me. Don't try and get me wrong. I know that you would love to worship somebody who could be felt, who could be touched. But do you know how terrible it would be if you took that love that I gave you and instead of loving me back for taking you out of Egypt, you would deceive yourself, prioritize the senses, not have the curiosity or imagination to understand that there could be a transcendent out of this world being who loves you. Instead, search for something in the world that you could touch and feel and say, oh, that's it, even though you kind of know that it's not true. And you'd make an idol to worship. How bad would that feel? How vulnerable would that feel? How
You'd
much would you
feel
feel taken advantage of
and rejected.
and rejected? That's the first two commands.
Um, to me, the great moment of vulnerability comes from I think, like the paradox of our entire relationship with God, which is that God has no need of us. He doesn't need to be in a relationship with us. But once you choose to be in a relationship with these beings, these human beings who are fickle and mistrusting and have limited capacities, well, how is God, who is grand and big and omnipotent and just beyond our ability to comprehend, how is he going to be in a relationship with us? Particularly, right, the worst thing about being in a relationship is being misunderstood, right? Like I It's the worst thing in the whole world when I'm in a fight with my wife and she misunderstands me. She just, no matter how hard I
And
try to
let me challenge you on that a little bit. Let's get to exactly why. Are you so offended if you're misunderstood in the world? Like you're such a thin-skinned guy? I mean, if you're on the subway and someone misunderstands you and you say, "Excuse me," right? You said, like, "No, I asked if I could sit in that seat. I didn't say that your trombone looks stupid on you. I was just asking if I could sit in that seat." You don't feel like your day is ruined because someone misunderstood you. So how come your loving wife who misunderstands you, you're so upset about?
I mean, this is the person in the world who most understands me, the person where I feel the most at home, the most safe to be my truest self, unbridled
Yes.
without performance.
And hence vulnerability. You're
Yeah.
vulnerable in love. Love makes you vulnerable. Any old person, they misunderstand me, it doesn't matter. But you love me and you misunderstand me? You love me and you don't reciprocate that love? That's the most vulnerable thing in the world.
What you're showing me right now is shocking because it's a way of reading the Ten Commandments that is a totally different read than anything that I felt before. Because if you're reading this with the commentary of Genesis 27, it's a totally different read if it's a vulnerable relationship based read, which is I'm I have a I love you guys. I'm trying to hear you and listen to you and work with you and be with you. There's something you should know about me. I'm not like those other things that you humans call gods. I'm not an idol, right? I'm not an image. I'm beyond this realm. Hi, it's Emu again. And if you're enjoying this podcast, I really want to encourage you to check out aleph-beta.org. We have an entire library of podcasts just like this one, as well as stunning animated Torah videos on every Parsha and holiday. It's the perfect place, I think, to immerse yourself in Torah. There are no ads, there are no distractions, there are no cat videos or worse showing up in your feed. So check it out, aleph-beta.org, or click the link in the description. This was really moving to me. It's like if you look at the first two commandments from one lens, they introduce us to a powerful, masterful, decisive image of God, a God who can swoop down from on high and just get the job done. But then look through the lens of Genesis, and suddenly this other side comes out, and you see that the commandments are also an expression of God's love and his, I'll say it again, and it won't be the last time this episode, of his vulnerability. It was a really beautiful reading, and we are not done with it yet. You know how Rabbi Foreman said earlier that there were more parallels with Genesis and the Ten Commandments, and he showed us like just a few of them? Well, there are even more, like a lot more. We've hardly scratched the surface. So, though we kind of had an answer to our vulnerability question, we kept reading.
Let's keep on going. I mean, let's read the rest of verse 3. Lo taslech hapesach b'chotma. Don't make an idol and something you can see. Asher b'shamayim mimal v'asher ba'aretz mitachat. That's in the heavens above or the land below.
Mm-hmm.
Lo tishtachavelahem. Do not bow before them. Lo ta'avdeim. Do not serve them. Imu, there's four things in a row here. There's Shamayim Mimal, the heavens above. There's Aretz Mitachat, the land below. There's not bowing to them and they're not serving to them. Look in Genesis 27. Do you see those four things in a row, perhaps? The
Oh my
heavens
gosh, should we have
above,
more
the
parallels?
land below. So bowing, serving. Does that remind you of anything in Genesis 27? Maybe.
I remember a blessing about bowing to other people will bow to you or your
Read
brother will
verse
bow to you. Let's see.
right. Read verse 28. Go
This is
ahead.
how Isaac blesses Yaakov. "Vayitein lecha Elohim mital ha'shamayim." God should give you from the dew of the heavens. Umishmanei haaretz, and the fat of the earth. So there's heaven and earth. Berov dagan v'tirosh, and a lot of grain and wine. Ya'avducha amim v'yishtachavu lecha le'umim. So the other nations will bow to you.
And serve you.
Bow and serve. Yes. Oh, wow.
Bow
Both of
and
them are there.
serve.
Wow.
That's right. The heavens above, the
Fascinating.
land below, bow and serve. It's as if the stolen blessing has become the stuff of idolatry in
Okay,
Exodus.
this is pretty convincing. That's pretty cool.
It is.
Trying to put it together.
It's like, one second, this is actually true. That's what it
No, that's
feels
very
like.
cool because basically the blessing is about other brothers and other nations bowing to you and like recognize you as like the grand poobah essentially,
That's right.
and they're gonna serve you and bow you.
But
And
in a
God is
way, I
saying,
mean, the way I see that is like, it's one thing if it was a blessing that wasn't a zero sum blessing. Be one thing if it was a blessing that you are blessed so that you can connect me to the world. That's a blessing that recognizes God in the world, that says the whole reason why I have this blessing is so that I can connect everyone to God. But if you leave that part out, if there is no, right, because remember, Yaakov never got that part of it from Isaac. Isaac never said, through you, blessing has come to the world. He mimicked all other aspects of Abraham's blessing, but not that. And if you don't have that, then who's the top of the heap? If you have that, then God is the top, and that everything is for God, and everything is so that God can connect to people. But if you don't have that, then who's on top?
"It's this nation, this one
The
brother."
nation's on top in a deep kind of way. Without the blessing that you're supposed to deliver blessing to the whole world, Israel itself becomes a kind of idol.
Shocking. So earlier we talked about how idolatry may stem from projecting onto God what you want to believe. But this new cluster of parallels was bringing out another possibility, another source for how we might end up worshiping idols. And it was surprising to me. It seemed like the Torah was implying that if you forget brother, if you live only for yourself with a zero sum worldview, you've actually forgotten God too. At this point, I had so many thoughts swirling around, both about the implications of these new parallels themselves and how they connected to what we'd seen earlier. So we took a step back to reflect. I'm getting like multiple vibes from you, right? Like, what's the point of this piece? I'm just like, where are we going with this piece? Is the punchline that God is showing us authenticity when revealing Himself to us, unlike Jacob did? Is that the punchline? No, it's more than that, right? There's vulnerability. Okay, so there's vulnerability and connection. But now you're showing me this piece that feels like zero sum, like this dimension of like
But it's all
Isaac.
but it's all part of vulnerability.
It all goes together though. They're not different things. They kind of go together. So Isaac gives his children a zero sum blessing, which necessarily makes one brother up and the other brother down. God seems to say zero sum, zero sum. I don't like that for you guys, but I like it for me, right? He sort of says like zero sum actually is a thing for me, for God, right? Like actually nobody should be bowing to any other gods, but you guys are my kids and right, you guys should all play well together. But that's fascinating that he takes that zero sum aspect and ties it to himself.
As we all do in love. In love, we do demand a certain kind of exclusivity. That's what marriage is all about, right? Which is, I am pledged to you, but our kids have got to get along, right? And we have to understand that no one kid is the object of worship, right? There's love of parents for all kids. There's love of me for all kids. And without that, you're in danger of idolizing yourself. And if you would idolize yourself and you think that you're the top of the heap and you think that you got this great blessing, right? From that your father gave you this blessing of the dew of the heavens and the fats of the earth, you got this incredibly fertile land, and you had to worship something, but you didn't know who because you were at the top of the heap. You might just take that, the dew of the heavens or the fats of the earth, and make an idol out of that. Lo ta'aseh lecha pesel v'chol tmuna asher b'shamayim mimal v'asher ba'aretz mitachat. Don't make some representation that comes out of the heavens above or the land below. Don't idolize the fertility of the land. Lo tishtachav elahem, and end up bowing to them and serving them as the source of your power that you can lord over all the other nations who serve you. That's not a path I want you to take. That feels like you're exploiting me. It feels like you're taking
You're
advantage of
taking
my
an aspect of
vulnerability.
me.
I loved you.
It also feels like
I
taking one aspect of the power that which is God and elevating it above others. Like even now, if I just read these two verses, Right? Isn't that what we said Isaac was doing to his kids? He took one aspect. He took power and said, "This is really important to me," but not the other parts, right? So maybe that's kind of what's happening
You're
with God.
idolizing the gift that I gave you. I gave you a gift of earth. You're pretending that instead of me, God, being the object of worship, who gave you this gift of earth, that keep God out of the picture and the gift of the earth is itself the object of worship. Don't do that. That makes me feel really used. That makes me feel really ignored. That makes me feel like my vulnerability that I came out and loved you is being exploited. You're
And
ignoring me.
I would imagine also it would make him feel like misunderstood, meaning you like one part of me and
Exactly.
not all of me. Because
Not
imagine
one
how that
part of
might
me.
go,
You
right?
like what I
Imagine,
gave you. You like
I
what
think
I
both.
gave you, and
I
then
think
you idolize that.
I think it could be both, though. I think we're saying two things that are related, which is that imagine you like what you were saying before. If you're a farmer, then the god of fertility is really interesting to you, right? And if you're a sailor, maybe the god of the winds, right, or the god of the sky is really important to you, right? You isolate one aspect of power and you don't do all of it. So God is saying, I'm actually the God. I don't worship the ones in the heavens and don't worship the ones in the earth. And then he continues. I don't know if we read this part yet. He says, "Don't bow and don't serve. Ki anochi Hashem Elokecha el kana." I'm jealous. And this is, I think, like crazy
That's the
because
vulnerability. I'm the
he's
jealous God.
vulnerable.
Who was jealous in the Genesis 27 story? Was
I mean,
anybody jealous?
both. I would argue both. I mean, Yaakov was jealous,
And what about Esav?
and he was jealous after,
They were
you know,
both jealous.
yeah.
It's a whole story of jealousy. And when Esav was jealous, what did he do? Read verse 41 in Genesis 27.
Vayistom Esav et Yaakov ala bracha. He hated his brother Jacob over the blessing. Asher becho aviv, that his father had blessed him. Vayomer Esav libo, and Esav said in his heart, Yikruvu yemei Evel avi. The days of my father's mourning will come, i.e., my father will die soon. V'harga et Yaakov achi, and then I will kill my brother.
Now, isn't it strange? Who do you think Esav is really mad at?
He's mad at. He should be mad at father,
But who is he taking it out on?
brother.
So he's really mad at a father, but he's taking it out on the father's child, a son.
Mm,
Does
here's
that
God.
remind you of anything
Yeah.
in Exodus verse 4?
Okay, davon
When
avot al banim. He takes
God
out the.
says, you know what? Spurned love makes folks act in crazy ways. When you feel
Mhm.
jealous, you might just be jealous and angry at a father, but the kids might even suffer for it, right? Well,
I mean,
there was
this
some
is the.
yeah,
This is the
go ahead.
craziest verse and one of the craziest verses in the entire Torah because the way we are now reading it, which is they were taught not to read it, is God as, spurned lover or crazy lover who
Yeah,
has been rejected and will lead God to do this
right.
crazy thing.
Now, I think, yeah, so the Mepharshim will all find ways in which there's versions of this that are just, right? As Rashi says, it means when the children take the ways of their fathers, right? And they act in those kinds of ways, then they bear
Hmm.
the sins that
Hmm.
were that they were educated wrong, but they have messed up lives because of it, something like that. But what God is saying is that there is a world in which there's a just version of being Esav. Esav was a guy who was crazed and was gonna like kill somebody unjustly because of that craziness. God says, I also have a certain kind of vulnerability. And there's a certain kind of just way in which anger can proceed from one generation to another. A nation is not just one generation. A nation is a nation, just like your body. Your body has cells, but those cells constantly reproduce and they constantly die out. And Emu, what if you got a speeding ticket because you were going 75 miles an hour in a school zone and you show up in court to defend yourself. And it's 9 months later because your lawyer got a stay and all that. And it's finally a year and a half later, but you're finally in court and the judge says, what do you have to do for yourself? How do you plead? And you say, innocent. And you say, well, one second, we have you on radar. We actually have your license plate here. We got a picture of you in the car on the body cam talking to the officer. Would you like to revise your plea? Right? I mean, like we have you. And you say, absolutely, your honor, I am innocent. You see, it was a year and a half ago. And the person standing before you, every single cell in my body has regenerated since then. I am no longer the man I once was. I am innocent of this crime. Please let me go. Is the judge going to let you walk? Judge
No,
is
he
not
will
going to let
not.
you walk. Why? Answer is it's still emu, even though every single cell is an emu. God says, that's Poked Avon Avot Abanim. It's a national crime, idolatry.
Hmm.
It doesn't go away from one generation to another just because all the people are different now. The nation suffers. This is a national crime that's of incredible gravity. And Nebuch, it'll happen that a couple generations will suffer for it. God's love outstrips that. Oseh chesed lalafim. For thousands of generations, there's love for those that I love, but there is consequence to betrayal. So God's taking the feelings of Asaph, as it were, and wrestling it into something else that makes sense within the context of idolatry.
That's beautiful. You see what Roy Foreman did there? We'd been considering what our connections could tell us about the nature of idolatry. Why is it so wrong? Why is it such a betrayal of God? But along the way, Rabbi Foreman had noticed a new parallel. God seems to riff off of Asaph's jealousy when he warns that those who practice idolatry will be punished to the third or fourth generation. And so, Rabbi Foreman switched gears to consider what we might learn from that. But I wasn't quite done with our first topic. I thought that there was still even more significance to the last connections we'd seen. And you may have noticed that I had been arguing with Rabbi Foreman about it for the last few minutes. You see, I was really interested in the idea that when Isaac was choosing to bless Esav, he emphasized one of Esav's qualities above all the others, that of strength, of being a doer. And in doing so, it blinded him, if you'll pardon the pun, from seeing other important values, especially those values embodied in Jacob. And I was blown away by how this blindness might shed light on Avodah Zarah of all things. What if, in addition to Avodah Zarah being about the objectification of a relationship, as Rabbi Foreman had suggested, what if it was also about only seeing one aspect, one quality of God, and refusing to see a whole? I thought that the second commandment might be illustrating this point, that God is not just one thing, one aspect, that he is mysterious and surprising and contains all sorts of paradoxes, and that to leave Avodah Zarah behind, one has to open up to the whole of God. So keep that in mind as we continue the conversation. Here's me and Rabbi Foreman. What I wanted to possibly, what was coming to mind to me when I see all these verses together, having seen what you've shown me, is a bunch of um, parts of God that don't always go together, or at least to the human mind may not always go together, that seem to come together. And God is saying, don't separate out one aspect, as I'm actually all these things. I'm a singularity, right? And it may not feel that way. So again, if you're the farmer, you may want to worship the agriculture god, but I'm also the heavens, right? I'm the God of the heavens too. You may see me as the God also who is jealous, who is punishing, but I also do chesed alafim, lo avai l'shomrei mitzvotai, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think that there's a lot of paradoxes here. And just reading this in concert with Genesis 27, where you have a Yitzhak who separates out and idolizes one value,
Aspect, yeah,
right?
interesting.
To the exclusion of another, makes me think here also God is saying the
Be
reason
open
you
to
can't,
all that I am.
yeah, and that may be at the root of what Avodah Zarah is. It's taking out one aspect and forgetting the wholeness.
Well, let's be a little bit more explicit about it. It's taking about one aspect of God and then objectifying that aspect of him. So, for example, God
Yeah,
is the giver of fertility.
yeah,
So now let me forget about God and say that fertility is God.
right.
God is the giver of the land. Now let me forget about God and say the land is God, right? God is, right? So whatever God is the one who bestows power upon me that all nations bow to me and serve me. Now let me forget about God and idolize the power of serving, right? And now the power that I have becomes the things that I worship. So what happens is that there is, and it's weird, by the way, because it's, if you think about the context of love, this is something very deep is happening here. Something that starts in love ends up being transactional and objectified. It all starts in love. God is like, I took you out of Egypt. I loved you, right? Come back to me. Give me something back. And like idolatry, let's just have a little compassion for the idolaters out there, or at least Israel being idolatrous. Like, it doesn't all come from a bad place. It's like Israel now wants to reciprocate, but they can lead themselves astray. They can lie to themselves in reciprocation because you can't touch and you can't feel God. And you can have this bias and you could say, you know what? I just rather worship something I can touch and feel, something that's in this world. So I'll knowingly lie to myself about who God is. And it's just much more comfy for me to, like, I kind of really happy with my power in this world and the fertility. I really think I should honor that. And before you know it, you think you're responding in love, but actually all you're doing is taking something, an aspect of God, and turning it into a thing, and then worshiping the thing because the thing feels good for you. The thing kind of works for you. The land kind of works for you. The dew of the heavens kind of works for you. The power kind of works for you. And so you can come to shul all day when you, and you could say, oh yeah, no, I'm very loving. Me, I'm a very religious guy, right? But in a subtle way, you just given into a transactional relationship with a thing instead of a loving relationship with the being who loved you.
There's something at the tip of my tongue. Um, these parallels are suggesting that there is a form of idol worship in the domain of brothers, right? That there's like what looks like idol worship in your relationship with God looks like one brother up, one brother down in the domain of brothers, right? Would you agree with that?
I would put it this way. What is the cardinal sin in a child's relationship with Heavenly Father? It's the betrayal of idolatry. Now, what is the cardinal sin in a father's relationship with a child? It's to love one more than the other, to make a
And
zero-sum game out of parental love, which should be for all kids. Every
mhm,
child wants to know that Father loves all of us. No child really wants to be the one who's loved more. It's fascinating. It's a total inverse. You see, when it comes to a child loving a father, there's something that has to be exclusive about that. There really is something zero-sum game about that, right?
right.
You need to love the father who loved you and not lie to yourself and exchange that for anyone else. But when it comes to a father loving a child, it's the opposite. Every child wants that love to be for everyone. It's not exclusive. I need parental love to be for me and for Debbie and for Susie and for Bobby and to all of my children in order to feel good about it. I don't feel good about it if I'm singled out. And therefore, the cardinal sin in parental love for children is the inverse of idolatry. Idolatry is to love one when I should be loving the other, right? The cardinal sin is exactly the reverse when it comes to parents with children.
Hmm.
Love us all, v'nivruchu b'cha kol mishpat adama. And through you, if you're gonna give me any favor, it's only gonna be because I can service you with loving all of the kids. If I can
Hmm.
help you love all the kids,
It's not really a leg up; it's in service of them. It
that's right.
sounds like bowing. Like, right, look at in both cases, like, one is you're bowing to an idol, and the other is you're bowing to a brother, right? So the brother becomes the idol. The vibe that I'm getting, and, like, you're emphasizing a lot about transactionality, which is what happens when you take something that comes from God and you objectify it and you, raise it up as important. That feels icky because you've now turned the relationship to God into something transactional, which means you've turned it into something selfish, all right? It's about you, not about us. But
Mhm.
I'm also seeing something else, which is about anytime a singularity, right? A group of individual beings, let's say a family, see themselves as anything but a family, right? If we're a family, you have 7 kids, right? Like, imagine one of your kids says, "This is really about me. It's about Moshe Foreman, and my child. The other kids should bow to me." What's awkward about that is like you've broken family. It's like you're incidentally the important one, and the
Yes.
other. So you've broken this singular entity by elevating one above the rest, but it's a
Interesting.
singular
Oh,
entity.
fascinating. So you're arguing that there is something idolatrous about it because really love is towards a singularity that cannot be broken. I,
Yes.
as parent, love family, which means I love
Yes.
you all because you're all elements of family. The reason
Yes.
why I love you is because you are my family, right?
Yes.
And to break that apart is in the process of breaking it apart, I objectify you. So it's
Yes.
almost like if I love you as just you, Moshe, but not anyone else, there's something false about that. Like, why aren't you loving anybody else? We're all family. So I must be loving Moshe for something not so essential to him. I love Moshe because he has this quality, but then I don't love him for the deepest thing he is, which is that he's my family. So
Right.
now I've just objectified him. Oh, I love you because you're good at X, Y, and Z. Really? So what happens is that is a kind of idolatrous thing. What idolatry is on the vertical relationship where
Right.
the child loves the father by breaking apart the unity of who he really is and saying,
Yes.
no, you're the one who provides for fertility. I love you because you provide for fertility.
Yes.
Well, if you
Yes.
love me because you provide for fertility, then wouldn't the most logical thing be to worship the fertility itself? If the whole reason you love me is because you provide for fertility, then what you really love is fertility. So once you break me apart and love me because I do this for you, you've already objectified me, and you might as well just love the fertility, hence idolatry. And it's the same thing with children. Once you don't love me because I'm family, you just love me for this thing. All right, so you don't really love me, you just love the thing. I just happen to
Yes.
be the one that provides it.
Yes.
Fascinating.
When thinking about idolatry, I was having a hard time grasping which is more essential. Is it idolatry? Is the essence of idolatry turning a relationship into transaction, or is the essence of idolatry not fully perceiving the reality of God, which is a unitary existence? It's all of it is an expression of God. And if you're going to separate out one aspect of God, you're not seeing the complete
And
whole
a
God.
unitary existence that just loves.
Yes.
I, everything who I am, have committed myself fully for everything that I am in love to you.
Yes.
Right?
It's,
That and therefore love me back. That's the covenant with
yes.
God. And
Yes.
therefore that's in essence in reverse, that's the same way with the father with children, which
Yes.
is you are all my family, right? And therefore I love you all wholly and completely for that, right? Equally.
I mean, yeah. So I actually don't think that that you can make a distinction then between like avodah zara at its core being about objectification or about not perceiving a true unitary singularity. I think they both come together. But now that's one thing I wanted to say. A second thing I want to say is again emphasizing that I would read verses 3, 4, and 5 as a bunch of contradictory elements coming together. I'm the God of the
Yeah.
heavens and I'm the God of the earth. I am the God who is jealous and punishes, and I'm the God who is boundlessly chesed, which chesed is also, it's very
That's
not
right. And
just.
so don't love me for any one of those things. Don't love me
Right,
because I'm so nice. Don't love me because I'm so jealous. Don't
right.
love me because I'm the God of fertility. Love me for everything that I am who've committed themselves in love to you because Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the God. Don't even love me for creating the world. So just one reason why you should love me, because I love you. You're my
Yes,
kid and I love you. I took you out of
yes.
Egypt because B'ni B'chori Yisrael. I looked at you like you're my kid.
And I don't know whether this is the right place to say it, but we began this season asking how could God do the revelation narrative by paralleling Genesis 27, the story of these two brothers fighting over a blessing. And now I'm in a place where I feel like he couldn't have picked any other chapter. Like this is the chapter he should have picked. Because if that's what God revealing himself to humanity is a story about um, a family that is starting to fray, where father misunderstands relationship with sons and sons misunderstand relationship to father and brothers, right? There's this triangle that's breaking apart. And there's this moment where one brother is placed above the other, and what it does is it dissolves family. It says, actually, no, I love you for Esav, you're strong, but I don't love you for family. That unitary unit dissolves in that moment. And so God says, actually, that's what I'm going to take and put back
Interesting.
together.
We have to go back
Understand.
to that moment, right? And
Yeah.
say it really is love of, right, love of the unified family, right? And similarly, the child needs to love the unified me,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Who
Other.
has committed themselves in love to you. You know, it's interesting when you go back to the first moments we hear about the love of the parents for Yaakov and Esav, there's something really interesting. Let me just take you back to that for a moment, right? So if you think about the first moments we hear about the love of parents for children, look at what we see.
Already, there's a division in the family.
But Yigdalu
First.
Hana'arim, and the kids grew up. Esav Yodei Ish Tzayid Ish Sadeh. Esav became a hunter, a man of the field, whereas Yaakov was an Ish Tam, a simple man who was sitting in tents. Vayehav Yitzchak at Esav, and Isaac loved Esav ki tzayid b'fiv, because his game was in his mouth. He hunted for him. The Rivka ohevet at Yaakov, and Rebecca, she loved Jacob. Now, what's the difference between father's love for son and mother's love for son?
There's no key. There's
There's
a
no
reason why
key.
Isaac loves Esav, because
There's something that he does,
yeah,
but there's
and
no
Rivka
reason for
just
why
loves Yaakov.
Rebecca,
There's no reason.
Rivka just loves Yaakov. Rivka loves Yaakov because you're my kid, right? And it's almost like I feel bad because you're unloved, you're not really loved by father. So I'm going to be the one who loves you because somebody's got to love you. And so she ends up overemphasizing that and favoring him. But it comes from like, you can't be left out, you're family, right? But Isaac is like, no, I love you for something that you've done. But you're suggesting that that itself is the beginning of the problem.
Hmm.
You don't love your kids for the things that they do, you love them because they're family.
Really profound. This is shockingly profound. I'm just like digesting. Seeing that I was taking a moment to process, Rabbi Foreman took the opportunity to zoom out a bit. We just spent a while unpacking the first two commandments, and Rabbi Foreman wanted to clarify what was happening here. That we were, in fact, starting to see a pattern emerge between the deception story and the Ten Commandments as a whole.
So Emu, what we've seen here is something remarkable. I mean, just to take a step back at 50,000 feet, do you kind of get the feeling that these intertextual parallels that we've been seeing between Revelation and Genesis are starting again in the Ten Commandments? It's like we saw this whole mess of them, and if you just like diagrammed it out, the beginning of Revelation was akin to the beginning of the deception story. The middle of Revelation was akin to the middle of the Revelation story. The end of Revelation was akin to the end of the Revelation story. And then suddenly you start reading Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and it's like, whoa, we're back again to the deception story. It sounds like God is laying out these laws and saying, the laws I'm giving you are based upon that story. We're going to look at that story, and it's like anything that went wrong, we're going to try and fix. Anything that was right, well, I guess we'll try and salvage. But that original blessing is going to become your laws, which, if you keep them, through that blessing will come to the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
If you can model
Mm-hmm.
people how to do this, then that blessing will be what it needed to be. It's almost God resting control of this blessing in Isaac's hands, saying, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to be the great father in the sky. I'm going to give you these laws made out of your blessing. That's going to be the blessing I'm going to leave you with. Let's watch it continue to unfold. Commandment number 3, Lo tisa et shem Hashem Elokecha lashav. Don't take God's name in vain. Now, Emu, one way, if you go back to Genesis 27, does this remind us of anything? Was there a moment in which someone took the name of God in vain? Back in that story, as part of that deception story, If you go back to the beginning, here is Jacob. He says, I am Esav, your Bechor. But father is not so sure. And he says, Maza mi hartalim sobni. I understand. I just sent you out to hunt this game. And like 20 minutes later, you're back again. What does Yaakov say at that moment that he's called on it and he finds himself in the moment needing to improvise?
He says, is it ki kra Elokim lefanai?
Ki
God
yikra Hashem Elokecha
Mm,
lefanai, because the Lord your God just happened to appear before me. Now that wasn't really true. Mommy gave me the food, but I can't say that. So it's like, oh, well, God just helped me happen. Like God's up in the heavens, and what's God thinking?
leave me out of this.
None of this.
You know?
Don't use my name like that. Like, why are you using my name in service of a lie? That ends up becoming a command. And
Yeah, I think.
Shem Hashem Elokecha. Hashem Elokecha literally is the same Hashem Elokecha as Ki Yikra Hashem Elokecha Lefanai.
Mhm.
I'll just have you know that the first time the words Hashem Elokecha ever appear is in the deception story.
No.
When Yaakov says Ki Yikra Hashem Elokecha Lefanai, very first time the Torah uses the words. And the Torah will not use the words again until the revelation at Sinai story in the Ten Commandments.
That's pretty shocking. That's pretty shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't take
I
God's name in vain. Don't use God's name illegitimately for your own purposes, is another way of seeing it. You can see what went wrong in terms of idolatry, or you can see what went wrong in terms of invoking God when God had nothing to do with it, but it was convenient for you to invoke God because it serves your own needs. Don't
yeah.
use God. And by the way, the commonality between idolatry, commandment number 2, do you see it? And commandment number 3, which is don't take God's name in vain, is what?
It's objectification of God, selfishness, you're pursuing your
Selfishness,
own
using
name.
God for your own needs.
Yeah.
That's idolatry, right? Which is that you see something self-serving in God and end up saying, I'll take that. Well, another way to see something self-serving as God is what if it helps you to take God's name, to use God's name to protest your innocence and to lie about God? Don't do that either. That also is a self-serving way to relate to God. So
Hmm.
don't do either of those, each of which find their antecedent in Genesis 27, just depending on the way you look at it.
Yeah, that fits very nicely, both in the objectification sense and in the sense of um, of a unity broken to benefit one party and hurt another. Also, I see that as well.
You see that in the case of using God's name in vain?
I think so. Yeah, meaning in Genesis 27, you see it right where Yaakov is using God to pull one over on his father and beat his brother essentially. But I think it's also in the commandment of not using God's name. I think the legal expression of this is seen in an argument, right? When two people are fighting over something. Will you swear? Will you use God's name to say, actually, I'm willing to swear that this is mine and not his, right? So it's about defeating a brother by invoking the God of all of us. So God says, don't do that.
Right? Don't lie as a way of causing strife between brothers who should be united is a certain kind of idolatry, right? Don't use my name to create division between children when I love all children.
Right.
That's true. Like God's idea is what are you using my name to swear for? That's like, what are you invoking me for your own self-interest? You don't think I love Bobby the same way I love you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's profound. Like Shem Hashem Elokecha also, the name of God is inherently, we've talked about this elsewhere, a name of Achdut, right? It is a name of unities. Yud Ke Vav Ke is the unity of time and right, Hayahu Ben Yihya, and Hashem Elokecha, right, is itself a unity, right? Taking these two aspects of God into a unity. You're going to take the name of unity and use it to divide, to win one over the other, one brother over another.
Okay, Ema, so what we've seen, I think, is that these remarkable parallels between Revelation and Genesis 27 don't end with Revelation. They continue in the Ten Commandments. They repeat themselves in the Ten Commandments. We have another round of them. God's saying, okay, we're going to codify this into laws. We're going to make some laws now that we're going to live by, given this experience that we've all had. And this is the beginning of those laws. And what I want to show you the next time we come back, that it's not just the first three commands. It's commandment 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 also. Every last one of the 10 commandments is going to be playing off of another part of the Yaakov and Esav story in the same way that the connections appeared in order when it comes to the 10 commandments too. The first part of it mirrors the first part of the deception, and then it continues going. Everything we're going to see proceeds in order as a mimicry of the Yaakov and Esav story. So let's
That's
come back
fascinating.
and see where it comes.
I know, he was wrapping up, but I had one more thing I wanted to suggest. A theory as to why there would be these two sets of parallels at all. And it had to do with one of the very first things we talked about in this episode. Isn't it kind of interesting that the first set of parallels culminates in that wordless shofar blast, and then the second set of parallels picks up with the words of the Ten Commandments? That does make me think that there's two revelations that were happening, right? A revelation of senses and then a revelation in words. And maybe we don't experience them, but we mostly think about like the Ten Commandments. But why
Interesting.
should it be that the parallels would repeat? Why are we
Interesting. That's
taking us through the
fascinating.
Genesis
So
27
it's,
story
when it's
twice?
almost saying like the Revelation had two parts. Before God ever told us anything, God just was with us through his voice.
Right.
So there's the God of being without even saying anything, says, here I am, remember this moment. Just relating to the God who has heard you and who uses voice in just as vulnerable a way as you did. All of those are aspects of God's being. And then there's God the lawgiver telling you what to do in this world. God says, here too, we're going to come back to the blessing, and the blessing that you got from Father was not quite what it needed to be, right? And in the Ten Commandments itself, God himself is saying, this is the blessing I want you to have. And that becomes the Ten Commandments.
Very cool. Beautiful. It makes me feel like uh, encountering God isn't, and religion in general is not merely a cognitive philosophical exercise. For those of you, the intellectuals who really like a sheer, you get the Ten Commandments. And for those of you who need some experiential education, you need to actually, right, you're going to get this being
Just tune into the
version.
vulnerability of the God
Yeah.
who says, I heard your cries and I love you.
Beautiful. All right, I'm really excited to see the Ten Commandments version of the parallels to finish that off in Genesis 27 and see what else there is to be seen here. Hi again. While most people are watching cat videos online, you're exploring Torah content. That makes you pretty cool. But if you want a lot more meaningful Jewish learning, you should try out Aleph Beta. We have 1,000 animated videos and deep dive podcasts just like this one. In other words, plenty of Divrei Torah that you can use to impress your in-laws at the Shabbos table or Seder. But even more than that, it's actually a lot of opportunities to connect directly and intimately to the Torah text itself, without any algorithms feeding you cat videos. There's a link to Aleph Beta in the description, and I hope you'll check it out.